So today we are going to be talking about another true crime case, and today's video we're going to be talking about a case that is very close to home for me, like literally close to my home. Like, this case literally happened like 10 minutes from my house, and I recognised a lot of the people that were doing like interviews, and like I've seen them in town before, and it was so weird researching this one. Today we're going to be talking about the solved abduction of Shannon Matthews. So before I get into this video, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. This is all just information that I have found on the internet and I'm compiling into one video on this case. So Shannon Louise Matthews was born on September the 9th, 1998. She lived in Dewsbury in West Yorkshire in England, and she was 9 years old at the time of her disappearance. She lived on a council estate in Dewsbury called the Moorside, which is very famous now because of this case. She lived with her mother, Karen Matthews, and her mother's boyfriend, Craig Meehan, or Craig Meehan. I don't know the correct pronunciation of that last name, so I might be saying both throughout this video, sorry. She also lived with 4 of her 7 siblings. Pretty much all of her siblings had different dads, and so some of them were living with their own dads, some of them were living with Karen, but we'll get more into the kind of family tree later on. The Moorside estate was a very kind of poorer area of Dewsbury. They were all council houses. If you don't know what a council house is, it is a house given to someone by the government if they can't like afford their own. That area had a particularly high crime rate as well as a particularly high unemployment rate, so not a lot of people were working, and a lot of people on that estate were claiming benefits for different things. Again, if you don't know what benefits are, if you're not from the UK, it's just like money from the government for different things. So like, say you're a single parent, you can claim for single parents benefits because you've only got one wage to look after your child. I don't know why I had to explain it in such detail, but people were claiming money from the government for different reasons. Shannon Matthews went missing literally like 9 months after Madeleine McCann, and that's a theme that we're going to keep coming back to in this video quite a bit, because the Matthews family and the McCann family were pretty much under the same circumstances. A little girl goes missing, absolutely no trace, they need help from the public, they need funding, but both the McCann family and the Matthews family, even though they had the exact same circumstances pretty much, they were treated very differently. The McCann family were middle class, they were wealthy, both parents were doctors, they had this gorgeous little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, whereas the Matthews, they were claiming benefits, they were living on a council estate, they were, I don't know, they were just treated so much differently than the McCanns were, and it's believed to have been because of social class. Especially in the media, which is arguably the most important part of a disappearance case, because that's how the majority of people are going to be able to try and identify a missing person. But the media were just awful about the Matthews the whole time. They were portraying them as lazy, scruffy, these people that claim all this money off the government, and like, they pointed out that all the kids had different dads, and it was just like, you never saw that same treatment with the McCanns, even though it was the exact same situation, and a lot of people do believe it was social class. But despite the family not being quite as well off, and despite them not being as conventional with all these different dads and stuff, the kids still seem to have quite a happy life, a normal life.
Karen's house is just like any normal family house. The kids would be on the game station or whatever, and that's how it was. It's just a normal house.
Shannon herself was a very quiet girl. She was kind of introverted, kind of shy. She didn't really put herself out there too much.
Quite quiet, Shannon, and withdrawn. She'd just put her head down and get on with things. She'd go in the bedroom and play, or you know, do her own work, or sit and play games on computer.
And because she was so shy, she only really had a couple of close friends.
What's Shannon like as a person?
Nice. Every time bells went, we always walked first people out to go and play field.
Shannon's birth father, Leon Rose, was pretty much out of the picture ever since Shannon's mother Karen met Craig Meehan, who was 22 years old, 10 years younger than her. Like I said, Shannon was one of 7 siblings to 5 different men, So this was a huge family, a very like big family tree. Shannon had one full brother, but other than that, the other 5 were all half brothers and sisters. And all of their identities are protected for obvious reasons. And although it seems kind of unusual for one person to have 7 children to 5 different people, it's thought that Karen is very vulnerable and she looks for acceptance in a lot of people. Karen Matthews does have a learning disability, which is thought to be why she acts kind of like she needs acceptance from a lot of people. She acts kind of childish, a little bit immature for her age. She's very vulnerable. And so it's thought that she looks for love in all these different men and she kind of confuses their intentions. But another theory as to why she has so many children with so many different men is because of benefits. Obviously, the more children you have, the more benefits you get for these children. And so it's kind of like Karen was also unemployed. So all these different benefits from all these different children kind of was her job. Like, it kind of was her job to be a mum, unofficially, but the amount of benefits she was getting, it was like a wage. Whereas benefits are supposed to be just like, you're supposed to have your job and then you're supposed to have benefits on top of that to kind of help you out. But if you've got 7 children, all these tiny amounts of money to help you out are going to add up to a full wage, aren't they? And Karen's own friends and family have said that they believe that like children equal benefits to Karen. And they believe that that was what was going on. So the day of Shannon Matthews' disappearance was Tuesday, February 9th, 2008. And it was a school day for Shannon, just like any other. Shannon got ready for school. She put on her school uniform as well as her winter coat. And this coat had fur around the hood. She lived in England. It was February. She lived up north in England. Like, around that time of year, you can expect -degrees. And so she was getting ready for school, making sure that she was warm.
Karen got Shannon up as normal as the rest of the kids. Shannon had something to eat, walked down to school, which she did every single day.
In the UK, well, in the north of England, I don't know if it's the same everywhere, don't mind me, but schools do free swimming lessons as part of the curriculum when you're around 9 or 10 years old, to like try and teach you how to swim for free. And it was Shannon's turn to do these free swimming lessons, and so her and the rest of her class all went to the local swimming baths that day.
Then after that, he came on bus, and when we got off it, I saw her walking up instead of down.
Her mother Karen normally walked up to the top of the road to meet Shannon as she was coming out of school, but on this particular day, Karen had been out shopping with Craig's sister, and she didn't get home until 4 o'clock that evening. Shannon's stepdad, Craig Meehan, was supposed to go to work that day around dinner time, but he was feeling a little bit unwell and so decided not to go in. So he was at home when Karen got home that day at about 4 o'clock, and he was the one to tell her that Shannon still wasn't home. Schools in the UK, well, in my area at least, Shannon's area, tend to finish at around 2 to 3 o'clock. Especially at around Shannon's age. She was only 9 years old, and so I'd say that school finished at about 2:30 for her. So at this point, at 4 o'clock, it had been over an hour since Shannon was expected home. At first, Craig and Karen didn't panic too much. They thought that maybe she'd just gone to a friend's house or to the park and not told them.
It was about, I don't know, 4 o'clock. I went down to Karen's. I just said to Karen, oh, she'll be playing at park or something on the way home from school, but she'll be home. Karen, she was okay. She was quite calm, but I could tell she was panicking because Shannon had never been late home from school before. But
by 4:30, it had been around 2 hours since Shannon had finished school and no one had seen her. And so Karen started going around to like her friends' houses and the neighbours' houses, knocking on doors to see if anyone had seen her or if she was at anyone's house. It soon got dark pretty early because it was winter time and it was freezing. It was February, and so they were starting to get quite worried, and Karen's friend Petra urged her to call the police.
Police emergency. Hiya, I want to talk to daughter missing, please. Right, how old is she? 9. When did you last see her? She went to school this morning. Has she been missing before? No, it's first time. What do they call her? Shannon Matthews.
Within minutes of Karen's 999 call, the police were then at her home.
And inquiries were started. Police officers went out and did all the usual knocking on doors, check the friends, check the neighbours, check the relatives. And she's nowhere to be found.
So quickly the news got around to like immediate family and friends, most of which also lived on the moorside estate. So they all just went straight over to the Matthews house, and the house literally filled up within like an hour.
When I went to see our Karen, I kept putting my arms around her, sat with her, and she was cuddling me, I was crying, she was crying. She was really upset.
Family and friends that night went out on like a manual fingertip search, all searching themselves for literally hours, like some of them driving around streets, some of them walking, like searching fields and bushes and just looking anywhere for Shannon. The next morning the rest of family and friends were informed because at this point it was looking very serious. Like she'd been gone overnight in the freezing cold. It was the middle of winter, so it was no longer looking like a runaway, now it was looking like an abduction, and so the story was ran on the local news.
Hundreds of police officers in West Yorkshire are searching for a 9-year-old girl who's been missing since last night. Shannon Matthews from Dewsbury didn't come home from school.
That morning, 2 police officers known as family liaison officers were assigned to the Matthews family, one of them being Christine Freeman, which was like the main one, and I'll be putting her interviews in here and stuff.
I suppose one of the first things that hit me was the fact that Craig is on his Xbox concentrating on playing a game, and Karen's just sat beside him, and they seemed to be side by side, whatever they did, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
One of the officers was downstairs questioning Karen and Craig and everything, while the other officer took a look around the house. And when they did, they went into Sharon's room and they looked above her bunk bed and they found the words, "I want to live with my dad," written on the wall. Meanwhile, Karen was being questioned downstairs, like I said, and she actually originally told this police officer that she had 6 children. When we know that she had 7, the police knew she had 7, but they just have to try and get her to say all these things like off her own back. They can't give leading questions. So instead of saying like, "You have 7 children, is that correct?" they'd have to say, "How many children do you have?" And she said 6. So they pulled her up on it. They were like, "Well, it says here that you've got 7. And she was like, "Yeah, I do. Sorry, it were a mistake." She just kind of brushed it off. But I thought that was kind of interesting to mention. She also ran through the events of that morning with the family liaison officers. She said that they all got ready for school as normal. They all, her and all 4 kids, all sat down at the table for breakfast. And then Shannon's last words to her were, "Bye mummy, love you." But just think about it for a second. Is that really like realistic? Like she had 4 kids to fully get ready, aged from like, I think the youngest one was like 4 or something. I don't know exact ages. But getting all these children ready at the same time and then all sitting down for breakfast at the same time. It's not impossible, but how many families actually live like that, you know? Like I know my family never lived like that, which is not a bad thing, it's just realistic. Like, you're not all going to be ready at the same time to be able to sit and eat breakfast together. So police were immediately kind of, not suspicious, but a little bit wary because it just seemed unrealistic. Like, I don't know, how many families actually live like that? I don't think I know any. On top of that though, that day when the family liaison officers went there for the first time and she told them these events, one of the liaison officers recalled that the table in the kitchen was covered in a load of stuff, just like clutter all over it, which, how are you going to eat your breakfast to a table if there's stuff all over it? Like, fair enough, this was the day after, so like this stuff could have been put there that night. It was chaotic, yes, but the Matthews maintained that they were trying to keep life as normal as possible for the rest of the kids. So if that was part of your normal daily routine to all sit and eat together at this table, you wouldn't let it get full of stuff, would you, you know? If you're trying to keep things normal for the rest of the kids, I don't know.
Within the first certainly 5-10 minutes, my phone rang and I've got one of these dodgy tunes on it, and Karen got up and started, "Oh, I love this tune." And
she started dancing, didn't she, just in front of the telly?
And I remember thinking, this is the first time I've met you, and there's something just not quite right here.
24 hours into the investigation and over 300 officers had been drafted in to try and help search for Shannon. And the community also started their own little search.
When they were doing searches, me and my dad went up and did it with them.
One parent would go and pick a load of kids up from school whilst the other parents out searching.
People worked the days off. People gave up the spare time. People, in effect, neglected their own families to search for Shannon.
People from literally all over West Yorkshire were travelling into Dewsbury to try and help find this little girl. Like, even my own auntie, that is how closely affected everyone was. Like, my auntie was gonna go out and do, like, the manual searching with everyone, like, the looking in bushes and stuff. But my auntie had just had a baby and she couldn't find anyone to look after the baby, so she didn't, no one cares. But my auntie had no idea who the Matthews were before this. Like, people that had no idea who this family was, never heard of them, were travelling like half an hour, 45 minutes to come in and try and help find this little girl. That is how affected everyone was. People were donating time, money, resources. People were literally doing anything they possibly could to try and help find this little girl. But at this point, Shannon had been missing for over 24 hours and it was looking unlikely that she was going to be found safe or alive. And so the Matthews family were warned to try and like stay inside the house and not take part in the manual search. Well, a lot of people were, like the whole community was just told, stop your searching, because if someone stumbled on a crime scene, one, they would see something they didn't want to see. They would see something unpleasant. Two, they would probably contaminate the crime scene if they just accidentally stumbled on it. They'd affect something, and it'd just be safer for police to do the search because they're experienced, they'd know how to handle a crime scene, and so people would just kind of want to take a step back from the search. The Matthews family especially, like, the police warned everyone to just try and take a step back from the search a little bit, but the Matthews family were pretty much like prisoners in their own home. They couldn't really do anything.
I understand why they don't want us to go out searching, just in case there is anything out there, and if we destroy it basically, which with the police are more experienced at searching. Fingertip searching basically.
So instead of the manual searching, like looking in bushes, looking in fields like the community was doing before, they started their own kind of different methods.
I myself went to Asda and got some t-shirts for nothing, and Shannon's picture were printed on them, and I took some a poster up to one at local shops and they photocopied me 100 copies.
Because this estate was a council estate, they had a building on site called the Tenants and Residents Association House, which is, I don't know what it's used for, something to do with the fact that it's all council houses, they need this building on the site, I don't know. But anyway, that building was converted into like a base for people to report back to, people to get information from, people to hand out leaflets and like collect leaflets to go and hand out elsewhere.
The TRA house was the main stop off if you needed more leaflets. There were strangers who had seen on the news about Shannon that had just come there to pick leaflets up.
The way the community came together in this case is one of the most memorable things in the whole case. It was just amazing to see this kind of community that the media had labelled as like lazy and scruffy and good for nothings. They were all coming together and they were all working so hard to find this little girl. They were just showing the spirit and the heart of the working class, and I'm getting really passionate about this. It makes me really happy.
Taxis were donating rides to Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield. That's how far we were going round, handing leaflets out.
And the media was so invasive the whole time. This family had just lost a little girl, she's gone missing, and they were just so like rude and just constantly wanting photos and interviews and pictures, which I can understand, but at the same time the little girl's gone missing. Like, so in the UK we have this thing called poverty porn, which is not what it sounds like. It's a horrible name, I know, but it's the nickname used for shows that kind of follow the working class and just follow them living their lives, really. It's literally like watching goldfish in a bowl. It's awful. It's a horrible concept. These TV crews pretty much just follow around working class people that are like on benefits, struggling to live, and it's put on TV for these like middle class families to watch in their big warm homes, and it just, I don't know, I hate the idea of it, but that's quite a big thing in the UK. And that's one of the reasons that this case was so big in the media. Like, yes, a little girl went missing, but children go missing all the time. But this one was kind of like poverty porn mixed with a child disappearance. Like, it was TV gold, which is just a horrible concept to think about. But at the same time, these reporters were thinking like, oh, this will be like really good TV. Like, the middle class are going to love watching this. Whether it was good coverage or not, they were still getting Shannon's face out there. They were still getting the story out there. They had a better chance of her being found. On the second day of the investigation, over 48 hours since Shannon was last seen, Karen made a public appeal on the news, despite police and friends telling her not to. She'd been advised against it by police because they know what they're talking about. In abduction cases, if the person that had Shannon, if she was abducted, if the person that had Shannon saw this public appeal on the TV, they would then know how big this search was, how big this appeal was to get Shannon back, and it had put Shannon's life at risk. They might want to hurt her, they might want to try and get rid of her, you know? But Karen didn't listen to that, and she put her daughter's life at risk and did this public appeal anyway.
Shannon, if you're out there, please, darling, come home. We love you so much. Me and your dad, your brothers, your sisters, everybody loves you. Your dad's missing you so much, Shannon. He's even out looking for you. Please come home, Shannon. If you're out there, come home. If anybody's got my daughter, my beautiful princess daughter, please bring her home safe.
Throughout this whole investigation, Karen had just been acting really weird and just doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing, like the public appeal, like dancing along to ringtones. She was just... It wasn't the image that you would expect of a woman that was fearing for her daughter's safety. It was, I don't know, she was joking a lot, she was laughing a lot. It was just kind of inappropriate. Don't get me wrong, I know it's important to stay positive during times like this. I know it's important for your mental health and stuff. But she was just, I don't know, she was doing it a lot. And like on camera and at inappropriate times, and it was just like, I don't know, really strange. I don't know, she was just really strange, like dancing to ringtones during the search for your 9-year-old daughter. Like, in what world is that appropriate? A lot of people said that she would just like turn the tears on in front of the camera, and then as soon as she'd like get back into the house after making a public appeal, she'd be all smiles and jokes again. Which, I don't know, like, your brain can sometimes do that, like, if you put into a very emotional situation, like begging for your daughter to come home, the tears will just turn on, but they won't just turn straight back off as soon as you go back into the house. Like, you'd still be quite affected when you finished, if that makes sense. But Karen went straight back to, like, joking and laughing. People think that Karen just really liked this new kind of attention that she was getting. Everyone was being so nice to her. Everyone in the UK knew her name, knew her face, wanted to help her. And there'd be times when they'd be out in public and someone would be staring at them because they'd like recognised them, or someone would come up to them and she'd be like, oh, do you think they recognise me from the news? Like, I don't know, just weird things like that. Like, your daughter's gone missing and your priorities are kind of like, ooh, who recognises me? Not, where is my daughter? How is my daughter?
I remember one instance where there was a bulletin on the news and she's moving the net curtain for the cameras outside to be able to watch the net curtain moving on the television, and it was all just a big game. There were a lot of enjoyment about the attention that they were getting.
She was also like 100% sure that Shannon would be found alive. Like, she was never fearful about the length of time that Shannon had gone missing. Like, the longer the time is that a child is missing, they say like after 24 or 48 hours there's basically no chance of getting them back alive. And Karen just never really thought about that. She just knew that they were going to get Shannon back alive.
She didn't think about Shannon being dead, and that's what got me. She never thought of Shannon being harmed or being dead, and she'd never entertained the fact of it. Whenever you'd say that to her, you do realise you might have to face the fact she might come back, something might have happened to her. And she'd say, no, it ain't.
In police investigations like this, where they have to interview like all the members of a family, they make a little like family tree diagram. But as you can imagine, Shannon Matthews' like family tree was huge. 7 siblings, 5 different fathers, and then like all their different families. It was just, there were so many people to interview.
On a normal inquiry, I would probably use one slice of A4 paper would achieve what we want to do in relation to the immediate family and friends. However, with this particular family, it blew out of all proportion really. It's quite unlike anything I've ever been involved in.
As police began interviewing the family of the Matthews, that was when they discovered that Karen Matthews had learning disabilities. She often acted more immature, she was a very vulnerable person, and the Matthews family often got into fights.
That's the house that I used to live in, and the house joining on was where Karen used to live. There was one occasion where there'd been a big fight in the house, and my friend and I we heard it from next door, and went in and actually took Shannon out of the house.
Police came and took Karen to the station while the neighbour Claire looked after Shannon, who was in pretty bad condition when she got to Claire's.
I mean, while we'd had her feet were absolutely filthy when we got them in, and we actually had to roll the dirt off the soles of her feet. She was absolutely covered in head lice. She was a very difficult child to get to smile as well, and she'd flinch with sudden movements and loud noises.
Claire rang social services so many times while she lived next to the Matthews because she was so worried about the children's well-being.
We just kept reporting and nothing seemed to be getting done. And we were saying that something's going to happen to these children. How can you leave them in these conditions? Because the house was filthy, it stank. It really just, you wouldn't want a pet dog in there, let alone children.
Social services had been receiving reports since the birth of Karen's first child in 1996 saying that she was a bad mother, she neglected her children. On an inspection of the family, social services found that the children showed signs of neglect, which I don't know what that means exactly, but obviously it's not good. I just don't know what those exact signs were. And at one point, Shannon and another sibling were put on the child protection register, and at one point another sibling got taken away and put into the care of a foster family. Social services also reported that the house was dirty, it was full of rubbish, often lacking electricity, so Karen wouldn't pay the bills and they just wouldn't have like lights and heating, and it just not good living conditions for children especially. On top of that, neighbours were reporting that the children were sometimes left alone in the house, sometimes even at night. They weren't attending school regularly, and there was alcohol and drug abuse in the home. But none of this really proves anything other than the fact that Karen's just not a very good mother. It doesn't link her to Shannon's disappearance in any way. I just think it's like valuable information for you to know. So forensic teams were brought into the house. At this point it was like 3 days in, 2.5, 3 days in. Forensic teams were brought in. Over 60 detectives were assigned to the case. And if you're not familiar with like true crime, disappearance, murder kind of cases, normally only 1 to 3 detectives is assigned to a case. So for 60 detectives to be assigned to one case, it was huge. Over 10% of West Yorkshire's forces were used in this investigation. And 10% sounds like a very small number, but if you think about how many police there must be in the whole of West Yorkshire, 10% of that is going to be a huge number. And obviously because they've got to pay all these different police officers, all these different people working on the cases, they've got to pay for all the resources, just everything. Like, there was so much going into this case. It cost a lot of flipping money. It cost over £3 million. Police questioned 1,500 motorists and searched over 3,000 houses in this investigation from start to finish. 3,000 houses. Think of like the span of land that would be. Like, think about the radius of 3,000 houses. That is a huge area. The Shannon Matthews case quickly became the biggest police investigation in 30 years since the Yorkshire Ripper. At the time in the UK there were 27 victim recovery dogs like in service in the whole of the UK, and 16 of these, which is like 3/4, were brought to Dewsbury for this one case. Over 3/4 of all of the victim recovery dogs in the whole of the UK were used. And less than a week after Shannon Matthews' disappearance, police began underwater searches, like divers were going underwater to see if her body had been put into lakes and stuff. Meanwhile, the swimming baths where Shannon Matthews went that day with school released the CCTV footage of her entering and leaving the kind of sports centre, and those were like the last images of Shannon, and these were so famous.
We had no witnesses to suggest that Shannon had been placed in the car. We had no witnesses saying that Shannon's been taken into a particular house. We had no idea where or how Shannon had been taken on that particular afternoon.
I remember seeing these clips of this CCTV footage of Shannon literally every single time we turned the TV on. These were so famous in this investigation because it showed what she was wearing, showed the exact last location that she was at, and it was just like the main piece of evidence in this story. A few days into the search, and people were noticing some inconsistencies in Karen's story, and I mean, nobody wants to doubt a mother that has lost their child, but people were starting to pick up on a couple of things.
She couldn't even be consistent about where she was when she reported Shannon missing. When you've got those lies, you can only lie for so long before you start forgetting what you've said in the first place, and I think that's what's certainly happened in relation to Karen Matthews.
And on top of that, people started to notice that she was always laughing and always smiling, like I said before, and people were starting to notice that it was kind of inappropriate. It wasn't like a nervous thing, it wasn't, I don't know, people were just starting to realise how strange this was. 4 days into the investigation, Karen Matthews was taken in for police questioning, not as a suspect, just as a witness, as Shannon's mother.
Just not like it used to be. It just feels empty now just without her. It's not like Shannon, which it's not. She's timid, she's scared of dark and everything. So that's how I know something's wrong.
After a week of searching, dogs, divers, fingertip searches from police, forensics in the house, literally nothing was found. Like, absolutely no trace of Shannon was found after a whole week.
I was okay the first week, stayed really optimistic, but I think in the second my views were changing because I thought, no way can any 9-year-old survive with it being so cold.
Police took all the Matthews, like computers, notebooks, just anything that could have any clues as to where Shannon had been, like anything that Shannon had been on or written on or anything was taken to look through.
The inquiry involved lots of different lines which all needed investigating. The frustration was none of them ever came to anything, or none of them appeared to come to anything. But we kept on, and knowing that it could be the tiniest little bit of information that could actually lead us to find this child.
After 2 weeks, a local business in Huddersfield, just a few miles from Dewsbury, offered a £5,000 reward for anyone that could give any information to find Shannon. And then a national newspaper called The Sun in the UK upped this to £50,000. So there was now a £50,000 reward for Shannon. But around this time, the media was kind of starting to lose interest. It was still a story in the media, but I don't know, there'd been no big breakthroughs, like literally not even minor breakthroughs. There was just nothing more to report. The Matthews once again appealed for Shannon's return, but this only made it onto page 19 of The Sun, which no one likes The Sun anyway, it's a shitty newspaper. But the fact that they only put it on page 19 showed that the public was really losing interest. Craig was given leave from his job as a fishmonger to help keep the campaign alive and just look after his children while all of this were going on. It was obviously very hectic. Karen was always doing interviews and going to the police station, and so Craig needed to be at home for the kids. Meanwhile, the media was kind of starting to change their mind about the Matthews, and they began painting them as villains almost.
Because I'm not high-classed in it, like the McCann's family, I don't make an effort and stuff like that, put makeup on and stuff like that. We live on a council estate. It's disgusting.
Basically, celebrities aren't in other people's eyes.
The Sun, that newspaper that upped the reward money by £45,000, were particularly bad for this. Like I said, absolutely shitty newspaper. But they were accusing Craig, the stepfather of the girl that has gone missing for 2 weeks. She hasn't been found for 2 weeks. They were accusing her stepfather of abusing her, assaulting her, and she finally had enough of this. She was scared of Craig, and so she ran away. And that was the story that they decided was a good idea to publish.
I think it's sick. They did that reward and then they went and put that.
How does he feel about it? He must be...
It's devastated. Can't believe it.
But there was absolutely no evidence of this. Like, yes, there was Karen's past, but they weren't accusing Karen, they were accusing Craig. There was absolutely no evidence that Craig ever touched these kids in any bad way. However, his mother did have a conversation with the son where she did allude to him maybe abusing them, which I think was very shitty of her, since her son's stepdaughter has gone missing for 2 weeks. Why would you do that? And the night that that article was published in The Sun, Craig Meehan actually took a mixture of paracetamol and alcohol, and it's unclear what his intentions were, but a lot of people believe that he was trying to attempt suicide. But even during the publication of such slanderous articles about a man and a woman that have lost their child and haven't seen her for 2 weeks, the media still had no problem harassing the Matthews family for interviews and for pictures.
They're pestering you again.
Come on in, Karen.
Excuse me, I'm not being funny, but can you just give her a break? Well, that's what I've just said. If you give her a minute, she might come out and do one for you. You know, they come down here for a little break. Just give them one picture and they'll leave you alone.
Around the 3rd week of the investigation, Karen Matthews was contacted by a psychic claiming to be able to help her find Shannon.
The psychic was there this morning after you'd gone. They come and said they were about this church down Dewsbury. You know, like the other trackers where that was like us.
Yeah.
Is that like a path?
Yeah.
Well, there's that church, isn't there? And then archways. It keeps getting pulled back to them. There's a psychic.
It was mentioned to police that the psychic had told them about the church, and police searched it, but again, nothing came of this lead. And I said it before in the Ben Needham case, and I'll say it again, I think psychics have no business trying to help out in missing persons cases. I think if they want to help, then do it on their own terms. Just don't get in contact with the family, because how heartbreaking is that going to be to have that hope, and then in case the psychic is not correct, which, let's be honest, they're not correct most of the time, like, just imagine the heartbreak that Karen and her family went through then for Shannon not to be found at the church. At this point, the whole of the UK just felt so much for this family. It had been 3 weeks since anyone had last seen Shannon, and it was very unlikely that they were going to get her back alive, and everyone knew it. People that had never met the family were sending them money, gifts, letters, just anything. Like I said, just people that didn't know the family just wanted to help in any way. A local supermarket allowed Karen and Craig to go and get their weekly shopping for free to help them out. And they actually filled one trolley with food and another trolley with beer. But the media didn't show the same sympathy for the Matthews family as the whole of the UK was doing. They were just constantly harassing the family while Karen was still telling jokes.
Hello, I'm so sorry to trouble you. I'm Graham Satchel from BBC Breakfast TV.
If you try later on, I'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
See you later.
What did they want?
An interview.
It's just like
That's getting on my nerves.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the only kind of breakthrough, it's not even a breakthrough. The only thing that came from police investigation was that they found that 1,400 sex offenders lived within a 20-mile radius of the estate, which is not good.
I've been checking, what is it, paedophile houses of them? Yeah, they were doing that yesterday, man. There's 5 just on this fucking... You're meant to get letters when they move on your estate, that's what they're normally saying it.
Thing is, they shouldn't be put on it.
paedophile is moving on
Children's
the estate.
estate.
I mean, the state of Toon being active, right?
Should put them somewhere away from everywhere else.
Okay, so I want you to pay close attention to the next clip that I put in. Just like, pay attention to who's talking, what they're saying, kind of facial expressions, body language, stuff like that. It'll become clear towards the end of the video.
Should put them all in a fucking house and burn it down.
What was that prison on Ireland called now?
Alcatraz.
Yeah, they should
Should
put
be a
them all
place
on
like
that.
that. Shove them all in one of them with a big, massive electric fence. They're not going nowhere.
Shove them on a boat.
If they try and escape it, they get fried. That'd be funny.
So the last kind of big thing that the community all did together was a sponsored walk, where the whole of the estate pretty much got together and they had this massive banner that they put along the front of them, and they were singing, they were chanting, and they were just campaigning for Shannon's return. And I remember seeing this on the news as well. This is again one of the more famous images from this whole case, like this massive sponsored walk, this whole community of people that the media had just slagged off this whole time for being lazy, for being scruffy, for being good for nothings, and then they were all coming together, all as a community, to find this little girl, and it was a really nice thing to see, you know. Karen then made another public appearance. She'd been making quite a few over the 3 weeks that her daughter had been missing, but in this one particularly, she decided to share her own theory. Karen had never once shared these concerns with police or her family liaison officers, which she spent all day, every day with. She'd never mentioned it to friends or family, and so it was just really weird that this was coming out in a public appeal, like an interview in front of all these different news stations for the first time. Like, she'd never mentioned it to anyone, and the first time she did decide to mention it, it was in front of all these people.
What do you feel?
Well, I think that somebody out there will know Shannon, was supposed to probably know me as well, and I just want her home safe, really.
I was shocked by the statement that Karen was making, because if you've got some information or you've got some thoughts that it's somebody that knows us, surely you'd be telling the one person who's spending the most time with you, or the two people that are spending the most time with you, you two family liaison officers.
But did Karen do it for a reason? Just 2 days later, on the 14th of March, a distant family member got in touch with the police to give some quite vital information in the case. This family member got in touch with the police to tell them that Craig Meehan's uncle, Michael Donovan, he only lived about a mile away from the Matthews, from that estate, and he hadn't been in touch with any of the family since before Shannon's disappearance. And I mean, it's been 3 weeks. That is a long time to just not be in touch with your family. Like, fair enough, he could have been busy, but for 3 weeks it's starting to look suspicious. So police began looking into Michael Donovan because this wasn't a name that they'd heard before. Like I said, the family tree was flipping huge, and they spent more time looking into Karen's side of the family rather than Craig's, because Craig wasn't actually related to Shannon, like by blood or anything. So they didn't bother looking like up into his uncles and stuff. That was just really far out. So this was the first they'd heard of Donovan, and so as they started looking into him, they actually found that he had 2 children of his own that had actually been taken from him and put into foster care. Donovan actually had a previous abduction charge from going to his children's school and taking them and abducting them while they were under the care of a foster family. And obviously police found this very suspicious. This was now a kind of lead in the case, almost. And so that same day, on the 14th of March, police decided to give Donovan a visit for some questioning.
We knocked on the door. We gave it a good hard rap, a policeman's knock, as they say. So much so that that alerted the lady next door at number 24, who came out to see what we were doing. During which she said, well, we can't understand why we've heard a toddler's footsteps. And those were the words she used, a toddler's footsteps.
The neighbour said that the last time she'd heard these footsteps was literally that morning, and she'd even heard them a few times when Donovan wasn't even in the flat. This whole time no one had answered the door while they'd been outside, and after speaking to this neighbour, they felt that they needed to get into this apartment, and so these 2 detectives just hit the door down and barged straight in, and one of them went upstairs to search and one of them searched the downstairs. A lot of the doors upstairs were actually locked, and so the police had to hit those down as well.
I thought I'd got it wrong, and then I heard Shannon's voice from within this bedroom. I clearly heard her say, "Stop it, you're frightening me now."
So he walked into the bedroom where he heard the voice from, but he couldn't see Shannon anywhere.
And then I became aware of movement within the bed. And as I went across to the far side of the bed, Shannon's head appeared on that side and reached over, picked Shannon up, and carried her out. I couldn't believe that I'd found her.
After 24 days missing, Shannon Matthews was found safe and well. So other police were then called in to search the apartment because now it was a crime scene. They'd just found a missing person there after 24 days.
And I asked her where Mike was. I says, where's Mike? She says, he was where I was. I says, in the house? She said, under the bed.
one of the uniform lads who was still searching the bedroom behind us sort of squealed, if you like, cried out, "He's here."
39-year-old Michael Donovan was arrested at the scene, and him and Shannon were taken to separate police stations. Meanwhile, Shannon's family were given the good news that Shannon had been found safe and well.
Karen and Craig came out of the living room and looked at us and they just smiled. Biggest smile I'd seen on her face for 24 days. And we all bounded into the living room, jumping about and cuddling.
We were all absolutely over the moon.
As you can imagine, in this community that had worked so hard to get Shannon back, they were giving everything to try and get this girl back. Everyone was just elated. There were street parties, there were fireworks. Literally everyone on the estate came out to celebrate.
People were getting drinks out and celebrating in the street. Just spontaneous party.
We were overjoyed and grateful that she'd been found alive.
Back at the police station, Shannon was being held under emergency police protection, and they can hold someone for up to 72 hours if they believe that they're possibly in danger or that they just need to assess the situation further. And that is what they needed to do because they had no idea what had just gone on. Donovan wasn't even in his first questioning yet before he started making some shocking revelations.
Is there anything you want to say? Yes, you want to arrest Karen.
Donovan then got a solicitor and made an official statement, which his solicitor then read out to a detective.
She said I was to keep Shannon and look after her, and she, Karen, would report her missing. I said I wasn't happy about this, and she then threatened, if I didn't do it, to get 3 lads onto me.
This statement was 3 pages long and it detailed the whole planning of the abduction from the beginning to the end.
And I was frightened that if I didn't do it, they would come after me. I said, OK, I'll do it. And she said there was money for me in it.
Something that I find interesting but doesn't really have much to do with the case is that as soon as Donovan got to the police station, he suddenly couldn't walk, he needed a wheelchair, he couldn't read, he couldn't write, he was always cold and he needed a blanket around him. I don't know, he was just painting himself to be this really kind of weak, vulnerable individual, but obviously police didn't believe it. He'd walked absolutely fine out of his house. Like, they knew he wasn't that needy.
Mick Donovan is described as being a loner, one who didn't mix very well, probably not very bright, but not quite the sad and pathetic individual that he liked the police to believe he was.
But 4 days after Shannon's recovery, she still wasn't home. And bear in mind, the whole community didn't know the circumstances. The estate, people on the estate had no idea what happened. Friends, family didn't know what happened. Only immediate family knew. Well, they didn't even know what happened. They just knew who she was found with, where she was found. But they didn't know anything of what had gone on. And so people on the estate and friends of the Matthews were starting to wonder why she wasn't being brought home to her mother. They'd just been separated for 24 days, surely they'd want them back together as soon as possible.
The first week after Shannon was found, it was a case of when she's coming home. First thing everybody asked is when will she be home? And then after about a week, we start thinking something's not quite right.
Karen Matthews herself, Shannon's loving and desperate mother, was then taken into police questioning after Donovan's claims.
He says that you asked him to look after Shannon and that there'd be some money in for it.
No, I didn't.
Money for him.
No, I didn't. That's a lie, that. We'll never let him go nowhere near my kid on his own.
Although still, she wasn't questioned as a suspect, she was just being questioned as a witness. Although she didn't quite understand this and she started being very uncooperative because she felt that they were being a bit blunt with her.
So I think the best thing we can do is, so that we're all clear about this, is tell you what Michael's saying.
He's like, I want even to know that he didn't know where he lived and all. never speak to him about anything about abducting Shannon at all.
In the search of Michael Donovan's house, police found so much evidence against this man.
In the roof over the centre of the flat, they found an elasticated leash hanging from a beam, though there's no evidence it was ever used.
They found a bunch of prescription medications in Donovan's kitchen, including travel sickness pills, antidepressants. They even found a lot of just little single tablets on the floor and on the side, and I don't really know why.
Donovan had left a list of rules telling Shannon to keep quiet and stay away from the windows. IPU stood for I promise you. Finally, there was the bed, converted by Donovan into a hiding place for him and Shannon to lay low.
The bed was taken from Donovan's flat as evidence of him actually trying to hide Shannon, proving that he knew that he was doing something wrong.
Were you trying to conceal Shannon from the police?
No.
And why did you choose that particular hiding place?
For days, Shannon had been in police care and in foster care, just while police were trying to figure out what the hell just went on for 24 days, and it was finally time for Karen to come and identify Shannon. She was taken into the police station, into a room with a two-way mirror, so she could see into this room where Shannon was, but all Shannon could see was a mirror. She couldn't see Karen. Karen successfully identified her. She said, yeah, that's my daughter. But she showed no emotion, absolutely no emotion, especially for a mother who hasn't seen her daughter for coming up on 4 weeks now. She thought she could have possibly been dead for 3 of those weeks. She didn't show any emotion. She didn't cry. She wasn't overly elated. It was a kind of weird reaction. A formal meeting was then set up to reunite Shannon and her mother, and this meeting was going to be recorded and supervised, just for general procedure.
We got in there and Shannon came running to her mum, mum, threw her arms round her. Karen almost shrugged her off. She came to sit down on the settee with me, did Karen. And Shannon stood up and I said, Karen, go play with her. And I had to encourage her to be with her daughter.
The family liaison officers recall Karen looking at her watch, looking at the clock, putting a coat on, just looking like she was ready to leave, looking like she was over the whole thing.
Karen was particularly cold and she'd no interest in her.
And even suggesting, she was actually saying, we'll be going soon.
She didn't want to be there. I think 10 minutes would have been enough for Karen.
Meanwhile, if you remember, right at the beginning of the investigation, police took all the Matthews computers, phones, things like that to try and search for evidence for where Shannon might be. Well, during that search, on Shannon's stepdad Craig Meehan's hard drive, they found 49 child porn images. So Craig Meehan was arrested for this, and even though none of the pictures were of Shannon or any of Karen's other children, this really changed how people viewed the whole case.
When Craig Meehan was arrested and later charged with possessing indecent images of children, the mood of the estate was one of disgust.
Karen's friends, Julie and Natalie, also started doubting Karen's story. Natalie had her suspicions pretty much from the beginning of the investigation, but she never really wanted to say anything to anyone because you don't want to doubt a mum who's just lost her child. She didn't want to think that about her friend, but obviously you can't help a gut instinct.
Now, when Shannon was found and they announced who she was found with, Karen got questioned on this by me and Julie. Now, she turned around and told us that she didn't have any knowledge of who he was.
But there had been rumours going around the estate from Craig's family that Karen did actually know Donovan. They'd met a couple of months previous at Craig's dad's funeral, and the two of them got on really well, and Karen was even sat on Donovan's knee at one point during the night.
I raised my suspicions with Julie, she raised hers with me, and we said there's something wrong here. We need to get together, we need to meet up with Karen, and we need to question her on these things.
Natalie was really trying to make Karen feel comfortable enough to tell them what had been happening. She was saying things like, you've known me for so long, you can trust me, you can tell us, we'll love you no matter what you've done.
Natalie had said to Karen, I know that you're hiding something. And Karen, at first admission almost was, I can't tell anybody what I'm hiding.
So Natalie put forward a theory about what she believed might have happened. She put this forward to Karen.
I says, you and Craig have gone through a bad patch yet again. I says, you've had enough. I says, you've packed a bag, thought, right, I'll leave him. I've had enough. I'll go away for a few days, let him pack his stuff, get rid of him, and then I'll come back and everything will be fine.
Natalie's theory was that Karen wanted to leave her boyfriend Craig, and Donovan had actually offered Karen and all of her children a place to stay until she could find her own. So Karen and Donovan planned that Donovan would go to Shannon's school that day and pick her up after school and take her straight to his house. Meanwhile, Karen would wait until Craig left for work that afternoon. She would gather up the rest of the kids and she would join them all at Donovan's house later. But if you remember, the day of Shannon's disappearance, Craig didn't go to work because he wasn't feeling very well. And so when Karen got home to pick up the rest of the kids and take them there, well, she couldn't because Craig was there. But Shannon was already at Donovan's, and to Craig, she should have been home from school 2 hours ago, and so he was panicking. He thought that she'd gone missing. And so Karen, being the kind of vulnerable, easily kind of led person, she couldn't think of a smart reason as to why Shannon wasn't there. She couldn't give an excuse as to where she could have been. And so she just kind of went along with Craig's panic. And when Craig suggested calling the police, she just did it. And then the lies just all kind of spiraled out of control from there.
And she turned around and she went, yeah, it's true. And me and Julie looked at each other and went, what's true? And she went, what you said? I said, no. So you tell me how it happened. I says, we need to hear it from you. How it happened for you.
And I said as gently as I could, Karen, because of what you've told me, we're going to have to do this formally. You're going to have to be arrested and interviewed. So I've got to tell you that you are under arrest for abducting Shannon Matthews. I can remember Karen saying, everybody's going to hate me now. And all three of us said, nobody's going to hate you, but the truth needs to come out.
So Karen admitted straight away in a formal police setting that she knew that Shannon wasn't really missing, but that was all she'd say at first.
And I know,
I did ask him to take Shannon for a while, but...
Say that again.
I did ask him to take Shannon for a little while.
Right.
Meanwhile, the news broke of Karen's arrest, and the whole estate learnt that this abduction that they'd just spent time, money, resources, that they'd just been so emotionally involved in, they learnt that it was all a lie.
When we found out that she got arrested over it, I was disgusted. You know what I mean? I was just shocked, felt right sick, thought, how can she do that?
People were very angry. Some of them had lost jobs because they'd spent time searching for Shannon. They'd donated money, effort, emotion.
It just went all pear-shaped. It didn't go to plan the way I wanted it to go to plan.
What is your plan? Why did you want it to go to plan?
Me told Craig it would over and to leave him.
In Karen's questioning, police couldn't quite believe that she had phoned the police, she'd done all these searches, all these public appeals, all because of a misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. They just didn't believe that. They thought that there must have been another motive behind this whole thing, so they continued to grill her on it. Obviously, Michael Donovan had accused her of wanting the reward money, and so they questioned her on that as well.
Originally, did it start off with Mick were going to take Shannon because you were having domestics with Craig, and then when the police and press took over, you realised you could make some money out of this?
No, didn't want no money.
Because that's what Mick's telling us that you've done.
But Donovan told police of a plan that he and Karen had devised together to try and get this reward money for Shannon's safe return.
I was told that if the reward gets £50,000, she would ring me, and I was to take Shannon to Jewellery Market. She was to walk around the market. I was to come from the top of the market and see her, and the cameras would record this.
But Karen Matthews still denied it.
That is rubbish.
Which bit?
Every single bit of what he said is rubbish. I'm not involved in any of this.
And he's told...
Yeah, he's told a lot of people a lot of lies. I want to go home now.
Pardon?
I want to go home now.
During Donovan's questioning, he was asked about how he'd been keeping Shannon, how he'd been treating Shannon for this last 24 days. and it turned out that he had been drugging her with those prescription medications that were found in his flat. A sample of Shannon's urine was sent off for testing, and the results came back much worse than police expected. Shannon had not only been drugged with travel sickness tablets, but also with antidepressants. The urine test tells us that Shannon ingested these drugs within the 48 hours before her rescue, but that's all. And so police, now that they knew that Shannon was definitely drugged, they wanted to know for how long and what kind of drugs, because there could have been more before this 48 hours. And so a sample of Shannon's hair was sent off for analysing.
The hair was cut into small sections, approximately 3 centimetres in length, and that would roughly equate to approximately 3 months of hair growth. Hair on average grows at round about 1 centimetre a month.
Shannon's hair sample revealed that not only had she been drugged within the 24-day abduction, but also in the 12 months running up to that.
The drugs detected in Shannon's hair were temazepam, a potent hypnotic benzodiazepine drug, meclizine, the active ingredient in the travel sickness pill, amitriptyline, which is a potent antidepressant, tramadol, which is an analgesic or pain-killing drug, and dihydrocodeine, which is also an analgesic pain-killing drug, which belongs to the opiate.
Now, I don't understand much about medications, but I do know that such a cocktail of drugs for a 9-year-old little girl is not gonna be very safe. In December of 2008, Karen Matthews and Michael Donovan were both found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment and perverting the course of justice. They were both sentenced to 8 years each by a judge called Mr. Justice McComb, and I never say the names of judges in my videos, but Mr. Justice, like, I had to. I had to. Craig Meehan was sentenced to 20 weeks in prison, so like 4 or 5 months, for his child pornography charges, and his mother and 2 of his sisters were also arrested for perverting the course of justice with both his crimes and his uncle Michael Donovan's crimes. One of Craig's sisters, Amanda Hyatt, was also arrested for assisting an offender, which is obviously Craig, and I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know. Obviously, Karen went to prison and all of her children were taken off of her and they were all put into foster families. The whole time that Karen was in prison, her former friend Julie Bushby was the only person to ever go and visit her.
And you were the only person to do that. Why was that?
I wanted answers.
And did you get answers?
No.
What was it you wanted answers to?
I just wanted the truth.
Of why she would have done it?
Well,
or?
no, it's not just that. She kept saying that other people, other people were involved. I wanted the truth. I wanted to know who, why, what.
She never told you.
And every time that Julie went and visited Karen, she'd been assaulted by another prison mate. Like, she was always coming out with like a black eye and bruises and bloody face. Like, the prisoners were giving her what she deserved. Karen was released early in April of 2012 after serving just 4 years. After putting her daughter through all of that, she served just 4 years, and Michael Donovan was released even earlier than Karen. Karen was given a new public identity, but the courts deemed that she was incapable of maintaining a whole new identity. So basically she uses this new name that they've given her in like public situations, like, when you're like reserving a table and whatever, just little things like that. But she'll still use Karen Matthews, like with the doctors and police and stuff like that, like official documents. Shannon herself was also given a completely new identity. She was put into foster care and she now lives somewhere else in the country, and hopefully she's having a better life than she did before. However, it's been reported that Shannon did suffer with nightmares and she had to have a lot of counselling. I don't know if she's still going through that. If she is, then that is really sad because it's been like 10 years almost. It's been over 10 years. And I really hope she's doing okay now, Karen's friends and family maintain to this day that Donovan and Karen could not have done this alone. Like, neither of them were intelligent enough to devise this plan and come up with this plan. If you remember, Karen was very vulnerable, very childlike, very easy to manipulate, and so experts that have looked at this case believe that someone else must have been helping them because neither of them were smart enough and Karen was really easily led. They believe that someone was encouraging Karen to go through with it and telling her it's not as bad as it actually was, because like I said, she's very childlike, and if someone is telling you like, no, it's not bad, you're not doing a bad thing, then Karen would have believed that, and that is what kept her going for so long, for 24 days. So just a side note before we finish this case, this is just a little bit of information that I found quite interesting. It was found that a month before Shannon's abduction, there was an episode of the TV show Shameless aired on TV that had a very familiar storyline. It was a show about a family that lived on a council estate where a young boy got fake kidnapped and held in a house just a few doors down from his own in an attempt at getting a £500,000 reward. Although the theory that Karen and Donovan got inspiration from this episode was dismissed by police, and it's not believed that they did, I just thought that was kind of interesting, you know. And that is it for this case. If you're just here for the case and you don't want to hear my own like opinions and inputs and stuff, then thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, all that. But yeah, if you want to hear my opinions on it, let's go. So, like I've said like a million times in this video, my family was very affected by this case. I feel like a stuck record. But honestly, me and Shannon Matthews were literally like 3 or 4 months apart in age. We were the exact same age when she went missing. We were both 9. And obviously I live like 2 towns away from her, like literally 10 minutes away from her. Well, not anymore, but I did at the time. And when you can relate the case to someone in your family, so like for example, the Ben Needham case particularly really affects me because Ben Needham was 1.5 when he went missing, and my nephew right now is 1.5. So when you can imagine someone close to you, someone that you love in that exact same position, it affects you just all the more. And I just remember being so scared for the whole 24 days because Madeleine McCann had just happened, and that was such a huge case that was in the news for literally the whole 9 months up until Shannon's disappearance. And so it just felt like one after another, like Madeleine McCann went missing, Shannon Matthews went missing, and I was like, how many like people is there out there abducting people? Like, I was terrified, I remember. And obviously it was a 24-day long thing, and like I said so many times in this video, I saw the clips on the news every single time I turned the TV on, and so it was a constant fear in my brain. And I remember the day that they found Shannon, my grandma came to pick me up from school. I literally walked out of the door to the school, got to my grandma. The first thing she said to me was, they've found that little girl. And I remember thinking, oh my god, yes. But yeah, I don't really know what I'm saying. My camera just died, and like, I don't know, I'm tired. It's like it's 10 to 12 at night. I need a nap. But yeah, I just remember like teachers talking about it at school. We had assemblies on it at school because obviously it was so close to home, and for all we knew there was like a serial kidnapper on the loose. Who knew? We were doing assemblies on how to walk home from school safe, and like always keep your phone on you, always do this, always do that. And I just remember like everyone my age was so scared because we didn't quite understand the concept that it could possibly be someone that knew Shannon. We just thought it was like a random thing, like someone saw her coming out of school and kidnapped her, put them in a car and left or whatever. And so we were terrified. We thought that we could have been kidnapped. I feel like this case is literally something out of a soap opera or like a film or something. She goes missing, it's all tearful, like the community all come together. She's found in the uncle's house, and there's a big lead attached to the ceiling, and there's drugs in the house, and it's all terrifying. And then the mum gets arrested, and then the dad gets arrested for child porn, and then his sister gets arrested for helping him, and it's just like one thing after another. It's literally like a movie. I felt like I was getting really like during that. It just doesn't sound like real life, and it's these kind of cases that I love to cover because it just doesn't, like, it's just like, that's not real. Like, how is that real? But yeah, I have talked for a very long time, so I'm going to shut up now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a big thumbs up on the video. Comment down below what you thought about this case. I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of thoughts on this one, so I would love to hear them. Subscribe if you want to see some more like this. I do videos like this every Wednesday and every Sunday. I'm tired, I'm gonna go to bed. Bye. Thank you for watching. Bye. I got something. Hold up. We gon' function. No assumption. Feeling like